Ba ba da ba ba. Ba 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 ba. Da 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 da. Da 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 na 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 da da. Da na 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 da na da na da. Da 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 da. Ba ba da ba 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 da ba ba da ba da ba ba. Ba ba da ba ba. Da 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 da. Ba 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 ba. Da da na na da 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 ba ba. Ba da da ba do ba ba do ba da ba ba. Beep 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 beep. Switch video.
Hey, and welcome to my Crash Course series, where today I'll show you the fundamentals of playing Warrior. This axe-wielding job lets you vent all of your frustrations by smashing things harder than any other job. It's been my go-to tank for a long time, and it's my current favorite for tackling new or difficult content. So first off, I want to look at Warrior's actions, go through them, then I'll should instead spend your gauge on Decimate, which is upgraded from Steel Sight. It's been my go-to tank for a long time, and it's my current favorite for tackling new or difficult content. So first off, I want to look at Warrior's actions, go through them, then I'll show you a quick rotation on a dummy where we put it all into practice, and then I'll focus on some general Warrior tips. We'll focus specifically on Warrior at level 100, but this will indirectly teach you how to play the job at lower levels as well. At the core of Warrior's rotation are two 3-hit combos. First we have Heavy Swing, Maim into Storm's Path. Finishing the combo on Storm's Path will grant you a small amount of health. This is very noticeable in long fights, and it helps to sustain you through a lot of auto attacks. Secondly, there's Heavy Swing, Maim into Storm's Eye. Storm's Eye will add a damage buff to your character for 30 seconds, which you will want to maintain at all times. You can increase this timer up to 60 seconds, but beyond that, any buff duration gained by using Storm's Eye is lost, so you never want to use it if your buff time is above 30 seconds. By using both combos, you'll gain a resource on your beast gauge, which you'll be able to spend on two other actions, which we'll get into in a moment. The Storm's Eye and Storm's Path combos are your filler actions, and whenever there's nothing else to press, it's time for these. In AoE situations facing 3 enemies or more, you'll instead want to use Overpower and Mithril Tempest. The latter applies your damage buff as well, and each combo will grant you 20 beast gauge. The first spender for your gauge is Felcleave, upgraded from Inner Beast. Felcleave is a powerful single target attack that costs 50 gauge. When you're facing 3 or more enemies, you should instead spend your gauge on Decimate, which is upgraded from Steel Cyclone. Your primary goal for now should be to simply avoid overcapping this gauge. When it comes to when exactly you should spend your gauge, in earlier levels it makes sense to hold on to at least 50 gauge due to how Warrior works at that point, but later on your burst windows will be longer than most damage buffs without the stored gauge anyways, and there are going to be some more hurdles that make this trickier than it sounds. Which is why, for the sake of simplicity, I would generally recommend not to save beast gauge in that way and spend it as soon as possible for the time being. So once you have a better grasp of a job, this is an area where you might squeeze out a little bit more damage if you feel like it. Next, Inner Release, upgraded from Berserk, grants you 3 stacks that can be spent on Felcleave and Decimate without costing you any beast gauge. Once you use Inner Release, you have 15 seconds to use your stacks before they will disappear. Considering each global cooldown takes approximately 2.5 seconds, that gives you time to use 3 other global cooldowns inside of your Inner Release timer without it running out, which you want to avoid at all costs. And this will be important for your burst windows. While Inner Release is active, you're also immune to some forms of crowd control, most notably knockback effects. This can be useful during some fights, but because you'll use Inner Release whenever it's up, it's a bit hard to play around. As a small side note, Inner Release also adds 10 seconds to your damage buff, so avoid overcapping here as well. In addition to granting you stacks to use on Felcleave or Decimate, Inner Release also gives you access to 2 additional actions: Primal Rend and Primal Wrath. Primal Rend also has another follow-up called Primal Ruination. Both Primal Rend and Primal Ruination are extremely high potency for Warrior and should always be part of your burst windows. Outside of that, it will lock you in position for a short amount of time, so avoid using it in situations where you might have to move out of an AoE, for example. The other ability Inner Release gives you access to is Primal Wrath, which will become available once you've used all 3 stacks of either Fell Cleave or Decimate. Primal Wrath is a strong attack around yourself, so take care not to accidentally use it outside of range of the enemy, because then no damage will apply. If you're in melee range and able to hit the opponent with your usual attacks, then you're in range. All of the actions granted by Inner Release, Primal Rend, Ruination and Wrath are AoE too, so you'll be using them against single and multiple targets. Next, let's take a look at Infuriate. This action has 2 stacks and will increase your beast gauge by 50. It also turns Fell Cleave and Decimate into the actions Inner Chaos and Chaotic Cyclone respectively. These are essentially just more powerful versions of your spender actions and will also consume beast gauge when used. Ideally, you would always want to fit 2 uses of Inner Chaos or Chaotic Cyclone inside of your damage buff, making use of the stacks that way. While Infuriate is on a 60-second cooldown, you will passively reduce it through the level 66 trait Enhanced Infuriate, which reduces its cooldown by 5 seconds each time you use Fell Cleave or Decimate. This obviously makes trying to perfectly time the use of Infuriate inside buff windows way more complicated than the average warrior brain can handle. But as a general rule of thumb, try to aim for at least 1 usage of Infuriate every time you use Inner Release. And when you have that down, aim to gain another use towards the end of your burst. What's more important right now is to avoid sitting on the stacks without using them. The next actions you'll want to keep track of are Upheaval and Orogeny. Compared to everything else so far, these are delightfully simple, as you'll just be using them whenever they come up. Upheaval is single target, while Orogeny is 3 targets and above. It's important to keep an eye on these and use them immediately or soon after they come off cooldown, because otherwise you might create a situation where they drift to later and later points in your rotation. And because of how simple they are to use, there's really no excuse to not use them as soon as they come up. Onslaught is a dash with 3 charges that has a potency of 150. While it can sometimes be a good idea to keep a hold of a charge for a moment, you will usually want to spend these when buffed or about to overcap. Because you gain a charge every 30 seconds, not using them will result in a loss of approximately 3000 potency, or the equivalent of 5 Fell Cleaves across a 10-minute fight. Tomahawk is a ranged GCD action with a potency of 150. We'll only ever use this ranged GCD equivalent of 5 Fell Cleaves, result in a loss of approximately, because you gain a charge every 30 seconds, not using them will result in a loss of approximately 3000 potency, or the equivalent of 5 Fell Cleaves across a 10-minute fight. Tomahawk is a ranged GCD action with a potency of 150. We'll only ever use this when pulling a boss or when we're absolutely unable to hit it due to mechanics. So rather than standing around doing nothing, we'd rather be spamming Tomahawk. And with that, we've covered all of the offensive actions. Let's put it into practice while I talk you through the rotation live. Okay, we're using a super high-tech tool called VLC Player for this, which is great because it helps me pause, unpause, and with my mouse I can showcase what I want to show you. So starting off, we're going to open up with Tomahawk. This is only relevant for bosses, but it helps you align your GCDs so they always happen at the same time throughout a fight, which is really helpful whenever you're trying to learn it. It also immediately gives us aggro. Some people use Provoke, but in my opinion, that's a bad idea. Immediately, we'll want to use a stack of Infuriate because there's no reason to hold on to it. It doesn't do any damage directly, but it gives us a stack that we can then use at any point during our opener. Now, we don't want to use it immediately. I clipped a little at you. But we want to get to our damage buff first. So hold on to all of your GCDs. I know it's very tempting to start spamming immediately, but your allies are getting their damage buffs up during this time anyways. So you want to wait a moment. And after your Storm's Eye is the moment whenever you want to press inner release and then go into your burst. So before this, ideally, you'd want to use a potion if you have one, a tincture. And then we're going to press inner release, and now it's spam time. So we're using upheaval, we're using our first dash. I also used our first inner chaos here. We're going to use primal rend, primal ruination, weave in more dashes. And at this point, we have 3 stacks on our Felcleave, 8 seconds left, which means we don't have any time to weave in any other GCD. So don't be tempted to press Infuriate here, because that would mean we don't get to use all of our stacks. There wouldn't be any time, and that would mean missing out on Primal Wrath, which would be horrible. Okay, now we have 3 seconds left. We have 30 gauge. That means we need to get to Storm's Eye. We're using Maim for 10 gauge. Storm's Eye also gives 10. And after that, it's burst window. No time. So right here, usually again, in an ideal scenario, you want to open up with your Primal Rend into Primal Ruination. But if you notice that your allies are delaying their damage buffs a little too much because they have let it drift throughout the fight, or they're just slow using it, then you can actually use a few Felcleaves earlier on in your burst window as filler because it's slightly lower potency, and then use Primal Rend, Primal Ruination towards the end of it instead. You can see we're using our stacks here. This time we're actually using another stack of Infuriate a bit early. And after your Storm's Eye is the moment whenever you want to press inner release and then go into your burst. So before this, ideally, you'd want to use a potion if you have one, a tincture. And then we're going to press inner release, and now it's spam time. So we're using upheaval, we're using our first dash. I also used our first inner chaos here. We're going to use Primal Rend, Primal Ruination, weave in more dashes. And at this point, we have 3 stacks on our Felcleave, 8 seconds left, which means we don't have any time to weave in any other GCD. So don't be tempted to press Infuriate here, because that would mean we don't get to use all of our stacks. There wouldn't be any time, and that would mean missing out on Primal Wrath, which would be horrible. Okay, now we have 3 seconds left. We have 30 gauge. That means we need to get to Storm's Eye. We're using Maim for 10 gauge. Storm's Eye also gives 10. And after that, it's burst window time. So we're using Maim. Seconds left. We have. Okay, now we have, which would be horrible. Okay, now we have 3 seconds left. We have 30 gauge. That means we need to get to Storm's Eye. We're using Maim for 10 gauge. Storm's Eye also gives 10. And after that, it's burst window time. So right here, usually again, in an ideal scenario, you want to open up with your Primal Rend into Primal Ruination. But if you notice that your allies are delaying their damage buffs a little too much because they have let it drift throughout the fight, or they're just slow using it, then you can actually use a few Fell Cleaves earlier on in your burst window as filler because it's slightly lower potency, and then use Primal Rend, Primal Ruination towards the end of it instead. Okay, you can see we're using our stacks here. This time we're actually using another stack of Infuriate a bit earlier. This is a bit risky with this stack, but it should work out fine. You can see it's going to be a little bit close. Last second. We actually managed to get in another Fellcleave there, if you noticed, and that actually got us the last Infuriate, so we're going to get another hit of Inner Chaos right here. Now, moving on to the defensive side, Warrior has access to many useful actions. I want to start off with Bloodwetting, upgraded from Raw Intuition. This ability has multiple effects. First of all, it will apply 2 10% mitigations on you, one lasting for 8 seconds and the other one lasting only 4 seconds. The short timer on the second part of the mitigation means that the action has to be used immediately before taking damage, making this somewhat tricky to use sometimes. In addition to all of the raw mitigation, it also grants a small barrier for a longer amount of time. And finally, Bloodwetting grants Warrior the ability to restore HP when using weapon skills. Weapon skills are all global cooldowns that the job has. The beauty of this action is that it will apply this effect not per weapon skill, but per weapon skill, meaning every enemy it is applied to. And that means you can get some ridiculous healing inside dungeon pools, for example.
Okay.
Nascent Flash, on the other hand, is basically the same as Bloodwetting, but for targeting other players. In addition to giving them the effects of Bloodwetting, allowing you to heal them, you will receive the same healing yourself, too. I personally use a macro for Nascent Flash that prioritizes my target first and then goes through the party list starting with the person below me, usually the tank. This way, in raids and trials, I won't have to manually target anyone in 95% of cases because the most common target will be your tank partner. Outside of Bloodwetting, Warrior also has Damnation, upgraded from Vengeance. This provides a massive 40% mitigation as well as 400 healing every 3 seconds for 15 seconds total, coming out to 2000 healing potency. This is our strongest raw mitigation available, and it's great for dealing with harder hitting tank busters. Additionally, we have Rampart, the tank roll action, which provides 20% mitigation and increases healing via actions to us by a whopping 15%. Thrill of Battle will increase your maximum HP by a whopping 15%. Thrill of Battle increases healing via actions to us by a whopping 15%. Thrill of Battle will increase your maximum HP by 20% and restore the amount increased. This is useful for making hard-hitting enemy attacks easier to survive, but it can also be used as an indirect way of healing yourself. In addition to all of this, Thrill of Battle will also increase incoming healing actions by 20%, both from outside sources and yourself, making it great to combo with other abilities in Warrior's kit. One such ability is Equilibrium, which will heal the Warrior for a potency of 1200, and then grant a heal worth 200 potency every 3 seconds for 15 seconds, resulting in another 1000 heal potency. This can be great as an emergency heal if you're starting to get low, to top yourself off after a tank buster to assist your healers, or to top yourself off before a tank buster if your healers are struggling. Let's talk about Warrior's party-wide mitigation for a moment. First, we have the tank roll action Reprisal. This is a simple 10% damage reduction on nearby enemies. Use this to weaken party-wide damage or during big dungeon pulls on multiple enemies, which essentially turns the ability into a 10% mitigation. Shake It Off creates a barrier around party members worth 15% of your maximum HP, while also providing some immediate healing and healing over time. Additionally, it will dispel Thrill of Battle, Damnation, and Bloodwetting, each adding 2% to the barrier. The general consensus is that dispelling any one of these mitigations for a small bonus to the barrier isn't worth it. However, it can be a nice little bonus if you already had to use your mitigation beforehand and it's about to run out. Because of the immediate healing effect that it provides, I tend to prioritize using Shake It Off when there are multiple raid-wide instances of damage that require healing throughout. Because if you cast Shake before a raid-wide, when everyone is already full health, that part of the healing is lost. So I like to think of Shake It Off as more of a recovery tool to prepare for more incoming damage rather than just straight up mitigation in any scenario. Holmgang is Warrior's invulnerability. When pressed, you chain yourself to a target and avoid your health going below 1 HP for the duration. It sounds simple enough, but there's one massive pitfall. If the target you select dies, the effect of the action falls off too. However, you can simply decide not to target anyone, instead casting Holmgang on yourself, which is why I personally use a macro for this reason. This macro right here will always target the player themselves with Holmgang. All other actions not mentioned yet are roll actions not specific to Warrior. Outside of Rampart and Reprisal, there's Arm's Length, Interject, Low Blow, Shirk, and Provoke. Now let's go into some general gameplay tips for Warrior. First and most importantly, there's a tip for using your mitigation. Your ability Bloodwetting can critically heal, and you are in fact able to force critical heals from Bloodwetting by using actions that guarantee critical direct hits such as Inner Chaos, Chaotic Cyclone, Primal Rend, or Primal Ruination, as well as your Inner Released Enhanced Felcleave, as well as Decimate. So in dungeons, ideally use critical direct hits to proc your healing from Bloodwetting and watch your HP skyrocket from nothing up to full. Personally, I use my first instance of Bloodwetting a few seconds into a big dungeon pull, because that will allow me to make more use of the healing effect. Next, Thrill of Battle increases incoming healing, which is why Thrill of Battle into Equilibrium or Bloodwetting will be an important tool for you to heal yourself more efficiently. A great way to use Thrill of Battle is right before tank busters, together with other mitigation, followed by Equilibrium when Thrill of Battle is still running after the tank buster to heal yourself. In general, when it comes to dealing with tank busters, I usually aim to use a combination of either Rampart and Bloodwetting, or Damnation and Bloodwetting for most heavier hitting ones. If you combine these with Thrill of Battle, you should be able to survive pretty much anything the game will throw at you. Bloodwetting is great as mitigation for tank busters, but should also be used just for its healing effect. If you're currently between tank busters and don't have to use this action within 30 seconds, you can put it on cooldown to benefit from the healing effect. There is pretty much no reason to sit on the ability until the next tank buster if there is enough time. That's also because Nascent Flash exists and shares a cooldown with Bloodwetting. Nascent Flash is a fantastic tool to keep your party going when things are falling apart. When one healer is down, I usually keep close watch over them in case I need to use Nascent Flash to keep them alive, allowing them to revive the rest of the party. And when off-tanking, you can use Nascent Flash during tank busters on your co-tank or just randomly to provide additional healing and mitigation from auto attacks. And these were all of my tips for Warrior for now. If you want to go into much more detail, including your melts, your openers, and so on, I would highly recommend The Balance, which is a Discord that I'll also link below.
Yo, hey, what's up, guys? I got all the tanks to level 100. It's gonna go over Warrior, man. Warrior didn't really change that much, so it has one extra GCD in the burst window, and it got an upgrade to Vengeance, which is now Damnation. So it's basically just 40%. Once you get hit, it'll trigger the Primeval Impulse, and it basically just heals you. It's a hot overtime, so it's a direct upgrade. So the job didn't really change too much. There was just one extra GCD in the burst window, So this is the opener that I've been using. I've been doing a lot of EX trials and, you know, that kind of stuff. This is normally the opener that I've been using, but you can adjust it a little bit. So I have 3 different openers here. I have a standard, an early inner release, and then a cursed as fuck pre-pull inner release. Let's just start with the standard. So it's almost the same, except for because there's 1 extra GCD in the burst window, which is Primal Ruination, you have to push your pot back by 1 GCD. Now, I want to point out here that I started to play strictly at 2.5 for all my tanks, and the biggest reason for doing this is because I don't like playing Paladin outside of 2.5, and the benefits of like 2.5 for the other tanks, in my opinion, are really good. The reason to stack skill speed, at least I used to anyway, is you basically had to fight for uptime sometimes, but that's not really the case anymore because they just give you uptime. So having a specific GCD to combat that uptime, it's not really a thing anymore. So I just said, you know, screw it. I'm just gonna play 2.5. Obviously, there's other skill speeds you can play with. I recommend playing at the skill speed that you find the most comfortable. 2.40 is really good. 2.41 is really good. I'm also a fan of like 2.46, 2.47. Not the biggest fan of 2.45. It's okay, but another big reason why I've been playing at 2.5 is because the more they release content, the more I'm starting to see that the mechanics are actually based around 2.5. So for example, like in the EX2, there's a part where you get knocked up in the air. You can hit your GCD, get knocked up in the air, and then you'll land, and then your GCD will be back. So you don't really miss much. At most, you miss maybe like 25% of the GCD. Whereas like if you have a faster skill speed, you'll be able to hit that GCD, but then your GCD will come off cooldown as you're falling, so you'll miss more. So you actually lose out. It's just like real little stuff like that, but it's also fight dependent. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because what matters is, did you crit? Yes, then you're a winner. Did you crit? No, then you're a loser. But anyway, here's a standard opener, man, that I've been using. I push my potion back by 1 GCD because you want to get this. You want to get this last inner chaos under pot, and if you use your pot like here, the potion will fall off before this. I've been doing it here. You can also double weave pot now, which is really good. So we can go ahead and take a look at it. Basically, do a countdown: 3, 2, 1. Infuriate. I'm just going to use, instead of a potion, I'm just going to cheap out and use a, and you shake it off because it's 30 seconds. So this is pretty much standard, man. At least what I've been doing. I've had pretty good success, had good damage numbers. So as you can see right here, so this will be your last GCD, and you should be able to get it. And there it is. All right. Yeah, so that's pretty much the standard opener that I've been using. It didn't really change like at all. We can look at this one. This is the early inner release. This is basically the same thing, except for, you know, you pop your IR right here, so you pop it like 2 GCD sooner. The reason for doing this is because this is actually the top opener, and the reason why that you would want to do this is because sometimes you want your inner release up sooner. I actually do not prioritize the 2-minute window, the 2-minute meta. I don't. I prioritize activations. So what does that mean? That means that I tend to use my buffs early because you can typically get an extra activation, and an extra activation is better than getting 1 activation under buffs. So like if you can get 2 upheavals, then that's going to be better than getting 1 upheaval under buffs, if that makes sense. The same thing for inner release, because inner release is it's a very interesting cooldown because you can use it and then immediately get this. Now, I wish that was the case for Primal Wrath, but unfortunately it's not. I'm not really a fan of the stack system. I wish that the stack system didn't even exist. I don't really think that there's a point to it. I think that once you activate inner release, you should just get this. But that's not the case, so it is what it is. Hopefully they change it. And another thing I hope that they change is I really wish inner release would grant you, you know, like 20 seconds or 15 seconds of Storm's Eye somewhere in there. I feel like Storm's Eye is completely outdated. I feel like that it should just be a trait at this point. And if it's not going to be a trait, I really wish they would add it to the job gauge, because sometimes maybe it's just because I'm old or dumb or something, but sometimes I struggle to find my actual Storm's Eye buff on my buff bar. You know, it doesn't make sense to me that Huton used to have a gauge, and why the fuck does Darkside have, like why does Darkside have a gauge but not Storm's Eye? That's very weird to me. Anyway, point is, you use this when you want to get in an extra activation. So typically I will blow my cooldowns early and hold them for buffs if possible, but I want to make sure that I get them on cooldown. So like for this, for example, I'll use top. It is very, very, very important that you get this on cooldown as soon as possible because of the push timings, because of activations, you know, that type of stuff. If you delay this, basically every GCD you delay this, it will be pushed back further into the fight. Sometimes that doesn't matter, but sometimes it does matter. And what does matter, it's very important. It's not that I play out of raid buffs necessarily. It's just my first priority is, okay, how many activations can I get in? I can get in 2. Okay, I can't get in 3 if I use it early. Okay, then I will adjust by a GCD or 2 and make sure that as much potency as possible can be under raid buffs. Well, my first priority is always to check the activation timers and see if I can get in more activations. So anyway, so this is the reason for this opener. Now, right here, after this Inner Chaos, your Storm's Eye will fall off. Does it matter in the long run? No. It's a gain to use it here because you're going to get an extra activation. And the final warrior opener is this. This is a cursed as fuck pre-pull. You will use this very rarely. I'll explain why you would use something like this because it's not very common. There are fights where the kill timing, it will allow you to get an extra inner release in. So I know this looks really bad. You're going to use inner release at like 7 seconds and then you're going to potion at like 1 and then you're going to dash in. Let's just take a look real quick. So let's hit the countdown here. And then you want to hit it somewhere around 7. So once it hits 10, you're gonna 3, 2, 1. I'm gonna pop this, and like I said, I'm gonna use a shake instead of a pot. I'm gonna pot somewhere around 1 or 2 seconds. I'm gonna dash in. I'm gonna use this. You're not gonna use infuriate. Unfortunately, this is very, very bad. And then you do this. And you're gonna hold this. I know this opener looks really bad, guys. I know it does, but trust me, it can potentially be a DPS gain. If you can get an extra activation in, getting an entirely new inner release or extra activation of inner release, it's going to be a huge damage gain. So anyway, so as you can see, this is pretty much the this is pretty much the opener. It's just really, really, really awkward to use, and like I said, you're not going to use this very much. You would use this in like fights like P4, the door boss. You would also use this opener in P8, the true boss. And the reason why is because if you pre-pull this like super early, you're able to get in an extra activation before any transitions or downtime. And this will result in a net gain of 1 to 2 usages throughout the entire fight. That type of stuff is more important than raid buffs in my opinion. It is a much higher damage gain. That is the reason for using this opener. You will not use this opener very much. I would say normally you would use this one or even the early inner release, but they're virtually the same. If you're not pulling for whatever reason, you can cut out the tomahawk, obviously. In this opener right here, you have like one thing that you can adjust, and this is also depending on your skill speed as well. So like I mentioned, I use 2.5. If your skill speed is like super fast, like I don't know, like 2.40 or something like that, you can probably shift both of these up. No problem. It ultimately does not matter where you place these two. As long as you place these two within these 5 GCDs, you know, you're going to be fine here because raid buffs are going to go up somewhere around here. Like the raid buffs are like 20 seconds, so they're not going to fall off until somewhere like right around here. So like basically what I'm trying to say is putting this here is no different than putting this here. Warrior has become a little bit more restrictive in the fact that you need to put these 3 fell cleaves in to get this. This plus a fell cleave is more potency than an inner chaos. The burst window has kind of changed a little bit in the priority. So it used to be you would want to get like both your inner chaos in with your primal rend, and you would prioritize your fell cleaves less. However, because we have primal wrath now, you're actually going to prioritize your fell cleave over inner chaos. Inner chaos is still a lot of damage, but the reason why I say that is because if you miss this is huge. So like let's say you pop your inner release, then you do 2 inner chaos plus a primal rend, primal ruination, then you only have 2 fell cleaves left or something like that. Or let's say you have to refresh your Storm's Eye for whatever the reason may be. My point is if you lose this is huge. So it's very, very important in every burst window to make sure, like if you have to make a choice between like getting this in and getting this in under buffs, you're going to get this in because you're always going to get this in regardless. So what I would suggest, you actually dump your gauge. Warrior is one of the only jobs that you actually don't want very much gauge going into a burst window because inner release provides everything for you. Well, inner release and infuriate. So the last thing you want to do under a raid buff or in the burst window is just a normal fell cleave. Like a normal fell cleave is not exactly the best. What I would suggest, what I would do is I make sure to dump my gauge entirely or as much as I can, and then I go into the burst with a prepped inner chaos. So I'll infuriate and then I'll go in. And one of the first GCDs that I do is I do inner chaos once I'm at 90 or when I see the raid buffs. After that, it's really up to you to decide. I typically will use a primal rend right away because it locks you in place, so you don't want to like be trying to dodge a mechanic and then get locked in place. Or you can save it for when you have to leave. Like in EX1, there's a part where you need to leave max melee. Well, if you save your primal rend there, you can leave max melee, spam your primal rend, and then you don't miss anything. You miss like an auto attack, that's it. So my point being is that you can primal rend, you can kind of mess around with a little bit, but the order of GCDs is going to vary depending on the situation. However, I will say that you should prioritize primal wrath. This is a lot of damage. It's going to be 580 crit direct hit on top of a 700 potency ability. So that's pretty much Warrior, man. I mean, honestly, it didn't really change that much. I'll have a link to the openers. These openers are like 99.9% done. This is during 7.0. There may be changes later on. If there are significant changes, I'll take another look at it. Last thing I want to touch on is holding your primal ruination and your potentially your primal wrath for 2-minute buffs. So essentially, you can hold these for 2 minutes. I would only approach this after you have completely GCD mapped the entire fight. And the reason for that is because to do this, you will need to delay the use of IR, which could potentially lose you a usage. And like I said, the way that I play, I always prioritize activations first. I am only going to do this after I know the ins and outs of a fight. Basically, the upside to this is severely outweighed by the downside if you actually miss the GCD or if you miss an activation. I would recommend only doing it though after you GCD map everything. But yeah, pretty much, man, that's it. Warrior's super good. I don't want to talk too much about the tank hierarchy on damage because that could easily change next week. This is 7.0. This is before the normal mode patch next week, so there's supposed to be buffs next week, so the hierarchy might change a little bit. But I will say that Damnation is really good. It's better than I thought it was going to be. Also, Holmgang is still king of the invulns in my opinion, and is still ridiculously fucking good. If you're new to Warrior or something like that, man, this guide is kind of like just my thoughts, my opinions on the job from a basic standpoint. You literally just make sure that your infuriate doesn't ever overcap. Keep up Storm's Eye. make sure you get in your 3 stacks of Primal Wrath every inner release. You know, just very, very basic stuff. And whenever you don't need Storms, Surging Tempest, make sure to use Storm's Path. I would, so me personally, I tend to overcap on Surging Tempest rather, if there's downtime coming. And the reason why I do that is because the difference in potency is just 10 gauge versus you can lose 10% damage on like 3 to 4 skills, which is much worse. Especially during prog or something, you can just kind of brain dead, spam 1, 2, 3, and then, you know, once you get a little more comfortable, you can start adding in paths. That is typically just for, you know, like kind of newer players, I guess. But eventually, you know, you start to use path a lot more. And there are times when it is a DPS gain actually to drop Storm's Eye for 3 GCDs. A good example of this is P1 of DSR. You will want to use a path and then use a potted fell cleave, because a potted fell cleave is going to be more potency than Storm's Eye on these 3 GCDs. So like really little stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's not going to matter too much, so I wouldn't really stress it that much. But yeah, that's pretty much the basic concept. You know, you keep Storm's Eye up, make sure this doesn't overcap, make sure you don't overcap engage, and that's pretty much it, man. But yeah, man, Warrior is insane right now. It's really, really good. So yeah, I guess that's all I had, man. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys.
Hey, and welcome to my Crash Course series, where today I'll show you...
Whew. Well, that's all the time I have. Really simple stream today. Well, I got 10 minutes. I don't know. Is it really worth it to get into 10 minutes of gameplay? I don't think so. I don't think so. Nah.